Okay, welcome to the fifth in a series of short videos, just practical issues about getting started in leadership. And in four, I talked about sort of finding leaders and identifying who they are. And in this one, I want to talk about building a team together in a kind of unity. I mentioned in that last one that we had these very talented leaders who did leave after 5 years. I really struggled with that. I felt a real failure, and I questioned myself deeply. Can I lead people with strong giftings? Because these were very, very capable, mature people. But what that did is I was left with a younger crowd, probably 10 years younger, of people, amongst whom there were some people with leadership gifts and abilities, I thought, but they weren't developed yet. And God spoke to me through some teaching and different sessions and conversations, and I realized that I had really missed it by not very early on with that other group of people, calling them together in regular prayer and decision making together. So I felt like I was kind of starting over, although we had a lot of staff. It felt like we're starting over, and so I went to I think it was 8 other leaders of this was YWAM in England, and we're mostly in the South, London and South, and I asked them would they serve on a leadership team, and I felt that we needed to meet together every week, and I felt that if they were willing to serve on a leadership team, then we would pray for the work in its future. We would pray for one another, and we would make the decisions we needed to make together. So 8 of them said yes. Now, I think at that time they were all married people. So it was 8, and the question was, do we have all the spouses in? And the spouses were some pretty clear leaders and others not. But we sort of made, I think, a godly compromise and said, look, we'll meet one week with just the people who are on that leadership team in their own right, and then we'll meet the next week with the spouses. And we alternated that way, and it worked really well for a long time. And that series of 3 things that we would do really served us well. I wasn't sure at the beginning, but what we did was we focused on praying for one another, and then prayer for the ministry, then business. And what we did is we said, look, when can we meet? And that was a difficulty because all of us were in the stage where we had young kids or just married and about to have babies and all that. And we settled on, after polling everybody, we would meet at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night. And everybody started doing that. And the times of praying for one another, praying and prophesying, and we get somebody in the hot seat in the middle, and everybody would gather around and wait on the Lord and pray for them. They'd share what their needs were and how they were feeling, and then we'd go into prayer. They were really rich times. And then praying for the work, well, that was kind of the opportunity. It was praying about the future. We didn't get that involved with the current problems. We prayed about the future, and that kept the vision alive. And what we agreed is we'd meet at 8 o'clock, and we would go through until we were done. And we would do the decision-making, which is kind of the business, last. And that worked so well because, we'd get to the business about 10 o'clock, and then people don't want to spend too much time. But we almost always went till midnight, and sometimes we went till 2 a.m. That was unusual, but we did. But because we put the business at the end, we avoided a really common pitfall, which is the business, the decision makings, the difficulties, the pastoral issues, all that stuff that we somehow like to talk about, and everybody likes to talk about it. Everybody has their bits to say, and that business side, or pastoral side, can expand and expand and expand until it takes up the whole time that leadership meet. And oftentimes, leadership meetings decline or degenerate into just talking about problems. And that's no way to lead. And we know it, but we don't know how to fix it. Well, I would urge you, if you're in leadership and you're trying to build a leadership team, draw people together, at least for those three purposes. And don't let the business expand. Do whatever you need to do to keep the business bounded inside clear lines of time, so that you give an hour, you give an hour and a half, whatever. Because actually, a lot of these things we talk about, the problems, the talking itself doesn't do a lot of good. We might get some wisdom, but a shorter time is usually every bit as productive as a longer time. So these are leadership meeting ideas. And what I found then is that out of those times, the work really began to grow. That's from there we began to see new training centers, new ministries start, outreach teams, teams for the homeless, counseling ministries, just multiplication out of those times. But I'll tell you what, they are hard to sustain because we get distracted and we get busy and our schedules change and people are traveling. So if you're wanting to build a leadership team, you got to stay on top of it and keep making the necessary changes to adapt to the way people's lives and schedules are changing, where you're still getting together, and make times in that leadership team essential to being recognized as a leader in the work that you're responsible for. Leadership teams are great, but they need a lot of maintenance.